What is the connection between the so-called liberation of so-called Palestine, which doesn't exist? What is the connection between that and the civil rights movement, not only in America, but in places like Africa? What's the connection? And what's the connection between those two things and the generalized anti-war movement, a group of people who oppose any war by the United States, whether it's Vietnam or whether it's Iraq? What group of people would champion those three diverse causes? What group could that possibly be? Who could be their leaders? How could they have originated? Why do they embrace three broad topics, diverse topics that are seemingly unrelated? Palestine, racism, war. One of their groups is actually called Act Now to End War and Stop Racism. Answer, International Answer it's actually called, and they are international. I grew up in the 60s, a little bit too young to have been drafted into the Vietnam War. But my older brother was of the generation that was subject to the draft. But because of my age, I was not aware of the civil rights movement, except only vaguely. I was not aware of the anti-war movement of the 60s, except vaguely, because I was just a couple years too young. But I'm aware of it now. I'm becoming more aware of it. I'm beginning to see the connections, and I'm beginning to see what is emerging in my mind, a worldwide shadowy network of individuals and organizations that I've begun to call the Shadow Party. I noticed that the John Birch Society has given them the name the Insiders. I don't agree with the things said by the John Birch Society, except I acknowledge that they have elements of the truth, and I am eager to gain a greater understanding of the big picture by gleaning information from all sources. And so I welcome the input by the John Birchers, and one of their researchers in times past, who may not be affiliated with them anymore, is G. Edward Griffin. And more notable to me than his interview with Norman Dodd is his interview with Yuri Bezmenov. Yuri Bezmenov was a KGB defector who defected from his station in India by impersonating an American hippie or a Western hippie, came to live in Canada, and after living in Canada for about almost 10 years or so, he was interviewed by G. Edward Griffin. And G. Edward Griffin, also being a part of the John Birch Society, had collected a lot of material about the planning of the socialist revolution and their goals toward overthrowing the United States of America. Today on YouTube, most of the YouTubers are younger, are even skeptical that there ever was such a thing as a Cold War. But from my point of view, it is the thread that runs through my entire life, from beginning to end to today. The Cold War, in my view, is very real, and the Cold War has everything to do with this Shadow Party. The Shadow Party has everything to do with the anti-war movement, the Palestinian conflict with Israel, and the so-called civil rights movement. According to the John Birchers, the civil rights movement was instigated by socialists. Many socialists were either under the command of Moscow or sympathetic to the totalitarian regime in Moscow. Other socialists were called Maoists, finding something that they liked in the teachings or ideology of Chairman Mao of Red China. From my point of view, these people are ignorant pawns, for the most part, of the forces of international communism that have always sought to overthrow every country on this planet, including the United States, and they've primarily focused on the United States. And strangely to me, they've remained focused on overthrowing this country for all these years, and I believe that they have installed this phony mystery man, popularly called Barack Obama, whose past is sealed up under lock and key, who is a known bold-faced liar. For example, assuring the Israelis and the Jewish citizens of Chicago that, for example, any attack on Israel will be considered an attack on the United States, yet choosing as his special envoy a man who has worked all his life to cripple, destroy, and weaken Israel, and to promote the so-called rights of Palestinians, which frankly do not exist. There is no place called Palestine. There are no Palestinians. There are very few Palestinians, and Palestinians, in my view, are those people who lived in the territory of Israel when Israel was created by the British, who won that territory in World War I, when the Ottoman Turks joined with the Germans to oppose Western Europe, the other countries of Western Europe, including the United States, when the Axis powers, or whatever they were called in World War I, lost. They, as part of the terms of surrender, lost control of the Middle East. The British decided that the Jews should have a homeland in 1948, which was after World War II. There had always been Arabs and Christians and Jews living in the area around Jerusalem. Technically, these Arabs and Christians and Jews could be called Palestinians, because on some maps and in some times that area was referred to as Palestine, as it also was referred to as Judea. Most of the so-called Palestinians today are Arabs who flocked into the area after Israel was given statehood. They are not refugees, they are undocumented immigrants. Most of them never had homes there. They came there seeking employment and seeking a livelihood, just as blacks in South Africa flocked into South Africa, a nation created by Europeans. Blacks flocked there for employment. These socialists worldwide have focused on so-called apartheid in South Africa and instigated one revolution after another, sometimes under the direction of Cuba. Some groups were sponsored by Moscow, and some groups were sponsored by Beijing. In my view, the worldwide socialist menace is a plague. It is a contagion. It sows havoc, despair, misery, and oppression wherever it goes. It's an evil thing. My parents' generation understood it and opposed it. The modern generation does not understand it and does not oppose it. And this is why the United States is in such peril today, because most Americans seemingly are ignorant of this threat.